So, hello everyone, Maddening. Today I want to talk about my top 10 tips and tricks to beat Fire Emblem Engage on Maddening. This is a variety of list here then, and I hope you like the video, please subscribe, and so on. And this video we're going to go over my top 10 from the kind of the least, least good thing to the best thing, right? And it'll be a mixture of these are very specific questions I had playing Engage into typical Fire Emblem strategies. Number 10, do not donate money. Okay, this is one of those traps I went into immediately, right? Coming in blind, playing Fire Emblem Engage, is a new feature Fire Emblem, and it's completely pointless. It is terrible. It seems to be almost pointless even if you're not playing on Maddening. But on Maddening, there will never be any. Now, when I say that, I want to define to say, okay, fine, donate, but only once. Okay, so after you donate, what happens is that you can now adopt animals, right? So you want to have one donation for 5,000 gold. Because see here, I donated the next step, right? 10,000 gold. That is pointless. Because on Maddening, you can never get any skirmishes until chapter 11. And even then, you only get one. Number 9, only have dogs. Okay. Let me specify the verse, right? So you donate again, only once, on the first country. Then you can adopt dogs. You don't need to spend 5,000 gold more in other countries. Only the first time should you really spend money, which is a bad system setup. But whatever. 5,000 gold, right? Now, only pick up the dogs. That being said, of course, the first stage, you can't get 5 dogs, so pick up the cat and dog or whatever. But eventually, you only want to have 5 dogs, right? Which you can get in any country. And if you have 5 dogs, you get the most blacksmith materials. So that's the best. By far, the dog is like 100 times more worth than a cat, okay? So if you don't want to be a cat person, be a dog person. Number 8, do not waste your time on Tempest trials. This disappointed me a lot. I'm just saying it here. This is a bad gameplay feature. Basically, if you do a Tempest trial, you have to have 3 fights, and then you get some kind of award, right? The award is terrible. It's very, very minuscule, so you can craft some better stuff, but it can be little. It takes you hours to do it when playing on Maddening. But you get no XP. You have to get really, really high difficulty to get any XP. So when you unlock Tempest trials, you won't get any XP on the current difficulty that you can play on. Of course, you can raise difficulty, but that's impossible to beat it, right? So you basically get no XP. And even if you get XP, it's incredibly low until basically the end of the game. So it's basically so that's kind of the boring stuff, right? Just kind of very general tips to like don't donate stuff. Let's talk about the fun stuff now. Talk about class upgrades, right? So first of all, in this game, Fire Emblem Engage, promote immediately. Okay? In the previous game, sometimes you want to save promotion later, right? In similar games like Shining Force, you want to save the promotion because you get more XP and more top levels. So in this game, promote immediately. Every character has an inherent level anyway, so there's no point not promoting them. They get more stats promoting them, so on. So you jump up immediately. Secondly, you also want to perhaps swap class with the second seal. Many characters in the game, for example Anna, are not very good in the beginning start class, but by changing them based on the growth, based on the inherent passive and so on, they can be much more effective too. So don't be afraid of swapping class basically immediately either, for that matter. But able to do this though, you need to use the emblems, right? For example here, if you have Unica with Lyn, so you can get bow and sword proficiency, right? This is something I personally didn't even know, honestly. So to playing the game, right, I'm used to kind of picking up the weapon, 3 houses you had at school and so on, but in this game, if you want to be able to swap classes more freely, you need to use the correct emblem, right? So for example, if I want Unica to get sword prof, Lyn is one of the ways to get sword skill. I will say it immediately, spoiler, but you probably know what I'm talking about if coming in here playing the game on normal or hard or whatever. But this is a huge spoiler, but also, I will say, if I have known this, honestly, I probably would have want to know this spoiler before I play the game. Yeah, to some extent, if this is from Maddening. So then number 6 then, spoiler warning again, right? You're gonna lose your rings. And this is very important to think about. For example, my Anna, my first playthrough here, she's locked out of becoming a mage, for example, right? Because I can't use either of the emblems that will give her staff or tome skills, right? So you have to rethink about that. I mean, straight up. In chapter 11, you're gonna lose all your rings. And yeah, basically, if you want to have a certain character being a mage or a sage, etc., right, you have to use those rings at that time. Because it takes way longer time to get those rings back again. And so you have to plan out that way earlier. Number 5, skill inherent. This is the last thing I'm talking about here when it comes to stat, class up and so on. And that is that something that I don't know. And I've checked the game UI. I don't even think tested. Not to go into more a side note, but my biggest concern with the game is probably the UX UI, right? I'm like, but anyway, there's a lot of stuff the game doesn't tell you. But basically here, right? you might look at this skill and think, okay, 100 SP dexterity, 300 SP right for SP2 and so on. What the game doesn't tell you, I don't think so honestly, is that if you level up this skill here, the next skill actually gets cheaper. The same skill then, right? So for example, Dex 1, 2, 3, X power 1, 2, right? Or defense or whatever. So again, this is something that if I known this, right, beginning of the game, you have Mort as your first emblem, you can then level up Avoidance, right, for example, on Allure. And that's good, because that's probably what you want for her. And then eventually you get Avoidance, a better Avoidance, right? But as better ones get cheaper, you can buy it immediately. The concern I had, right, started playing the game blind, was that, oh, you only have very limited spaces for your skills. So I don't want to buy like a level 1 evasion when I have a level 3 evasion or 2, whatever, coming later, right? But again, the level 2 evasion actually gets cheaper if you have the first evasion. So there's no purpose of saving your SP if you want, for example, defense 1, 2, 3, or like magic 2, magic 3 and so on. You just get magic 2 until you get magic 3. So this makes the games a lot easier in the beginning of the game, right? When you unlock the first steps of the emblem characters and buying those skills, right? Because I saved my SP, right, from maybe the first, I don't know, 6, 7 chapters. Final bit then, gameplay mechanics, right? Strategies, randomness. So I could make another video about this, which I might do in the future. So subscribe, slap button if you want that, right? But I have worked as a game developer for 15 years, and I'm very good when it comes to probability math and AI and so on. One of my specialties. And it is very clear how the probability math works in this game. So I'm going to explain it here very briefly, right? But again, this would be like an hour video if I really went into it. But it's basically very easy for me to know if I should rewind or not, or how rewind works, so on, right? So I will explain it here. And all the randomness stuff. I made another video earlier this week, right, about the Esrin thing, coming to that later soon here. But anyway, let's first look at general strategy to play Engage, which of course is the dodge tank, right? So the best way to play Maddening on Fire Emblem is straight at dodge tanking. You need to have Louis or some other tank, right, more or less. But what's the most important is a cat like Yunaka. You're always going to need a dodge tank. Bush, I'm not saying this is some genius strategy. But again, seriously, this is how you play Fire Emblem, even on hard normal 2, especially on Maddening, right? She misses right. However, here's something you have to see right now here. They ignore her. There's a huge difference though in Fire Emblem Engage. As you saw here, I used my dodge tank Yunaka, right? Which is again the basic strategy of playing Fire Emblem, right? However, one new thing here is very important to know in Engage, the 3 house didn't have, is that they won't attack you if you have perfect evasion. So you can see here, if I would attack this person here now, so you see here, the mage attacked me, because the mage had roughly 30% hit rate, right? Because they ignore the bush evasion. But if you look at Archer, he has 0% hit chance, so he ignores me now. So this is a huge difference, again, this is a huge difference, right? So if you play something like Yunaka, and I really mean it, right? You have to lower her evasion. Further you get into the game, she basically gets too good at evading, and then the AI, in this game and not in previous games, will avoid you, right? So they just run past you instead. So they've just ignored you. You look at one of my streams where I play Yunaka in like 10 characters run past her, right? So she actually is too good of a tank now, which is a new thing in Engage turn. So that's why I'm putting in like a side tip here. Dodge tank is still the best thing in the game, but you need to make sure that they have like 90 roughly % evasion. So you look at my short knife, right? I expect it to increase her evasion, right? Obviously, now I know these things, so I'm talking about it, so I'm going to remove that that emblem, that buff on it, to have higher evasion when I actually play the game. But to just show you what I'm talking about, right? In the beginning of the game, this is like a must-have, right? There's increased evasion on her, because that's just impossible to kill them. But eventually, then I'm talking about, you have to remove the evasion, right? And get increased damage or whatever, because, yeah, she's actually a bad tank now. So number 3, randomness and rewind wasting, right? So what I mean here, and it's a very mathematic here, but basically the game's probability math, and I'll explain it in market theory and show you in a side point here. But what it means is that if the game has decided something, it's not gonna change that. So if a character gets crit, they're always gonna get critical. I think the best example that happened to me playing this game was actually on this stage, but the normal stage, chapter 10, when Jade, standing over here, the normal stage, she got critical every time by an assassin, every time. No matter what I did, right? And that is because the game has 2 different probability maps, one for your characters, one for your allies. So no matter what I did as a player, I couldn't save her, because she would always get critical. So the only way to save her is to actually remove the enemies from every attack her, right? But if they attacked her, she would always critical, right? And that's because the game has a deterministic mathematics that we decided previously, right? That's right. I'm gonna explain it with freaking paint, baby. Mathematical paint here. But basically, this is how the game works, right? This is called marker theory, for example, or probability state marker theory. So this is turn 1, right? Okay, so you start here, you do something. And if you move up here and attack this enemy, we get in this state. And if you do something else, in this state, right? And that's kind of how the game works. The game is random to some extent, but isn't really random. And what's important to understand here is that if you're in this state here, which you get critical, if you move, let's say attack an enemy here, right? Then you get crit and you die. Because usually on Maddening, if we kill you, of course, it's a crit, right? You get crit by an enemy, you have to rewind because my character died, right? Maybe it's the main character, maybe the character here, you have to rewind. However, what's very important to understand here in this point is that if you're in this state here, in this state cycle of probability, you can never survive the attack. You will never be able to survive. So first of all, immediately, if your character dies here, let's say Yunika attacks, she gets crit and dies here from this state. If you rewind one step back, right, to Yunika again, and she attacks the same enemy, she will always get crit, okay? 100% chance. Even if the enemy has like 1% crit chance, and she attacks and dies there, she will always die, because the game isn't actually very random. Most of the game's randomness is done here, right, when you spawn in the game. Here the game kind of randomizes these numbers, and it kind of redoes it a few times in the beginning, and then depending if you do really big changes, it re-randomizes. This is very clear, especially as I mentioned with allies, because the allies, they basically have their own circle down here, right? They have their own like little world, so no matter what you do as a player, you basically can't really seem to affect the randomness what happens with the allies. If you want to save an ally from dying, making them do different thing won't help. So if you have an enemy, right, this is an enemy state here, you have to do something like running in basically here, like interfere with the enemy. If this enemy here can attack your ally, they will always die, right? So you have to kind of block that thing. That's basically the only way to kind of save your ally, or something like that, coming in, something like that, right? Which makes it sound like the same thing, but it isn't. Because what I mean is that no matter what the ally do, they will always get crit here. But if you interfere, basically attacking the crit, they won't get crit, right? It's not the same thing, right? The probability is the same. There's no randomness to it. And coming back here again then with the rewind. Yes, never rewind like one step like that. It will never do any difference. Of course, you can possibly run away with your character like over here or something and just not do it, right? Of course, that's a possibility. But every time you do this action, you will die, okay? And because the game, again, isn't truly probable, doesn't have what's called random seeding when you reload, if you're here, in this state here, and then do this thing, you will get the exact same result, right? So if you go back two steps, and say this is a character moving or something, and then Unica attacks, you will die again, right? If you go back to this state, a character moving, this like that, Unica attacks, dies. So even in all these states, Unica will die. If you go even back here and do the exact same thing, you know, the exact same path there, you will die. If you do, so even if you go back like 4 steps, if you do the exact same thing again, you will always die. And that means the game, again, isn't actually truly random, right? Like I said, the game has basically already decided over here that Unica always will die if she attacks this enemy. So no matter how you get that enemy of Unica, she always will die. She will always get critical. So basically, you know that the game will always kill her by attacking an enemy, no matter what you do in that turn. So it's very important when you rewind to be like, okay, I cannot do this X thing. What rewind shows you isn't so much a path, it more shows you the result of certain randomness that have been decided. Coming from that, number 2, S-ring and how it also isn't random, right? So I already made a video about this. I'll link the video below for that, so if you haven't seen it yet. But basically, again, summarizing here quickly, right? This is not random here. The game's already decided for you when you enter Somniel or enter the door here, whatever. Basically, when each time you re-enter your city, given chapter, it randomizes basically before that, right? So there's actually no randomness here. And again, I made another video about it, but again, it's the same math I was showing with the rewind strategies that the game already knows. So you can basically decide what S3 you get. And the final point, number 1, throw away your waifus. No, but the thing is that this is actually an issue I have with the game, generally speaking. I think it actually does devalue the game to some extent, right? And that is that when new characters enters, they're basically always better than your old characters, right? So because this game has no farming really, right? You can't really skirmish. As I mentioned earlier, the Tempest trial doesn't do anything. Anything in the time trial doesn't really do much, and so on. What it means is that in this game, it's almost impossible to have your characters keep up with the levels. Unfortunately, when you get a new character, they have to join your party. Yeah, they're much better than your previous characters. If you get, for example, a new character coming in as a good example is probably when you get Kagetsu. When Kagetsu enters, Lapis is just way worse. Yeah, Lapis, Getsu are more or less the same character, right? It's like a sword master, a sword fighter, but one of them is like 5-6 levels higher on Maddening when you get Getsu, probably even more than that, like 7 levels higher, because it costs money to buy the seals. So you have little money, little gold, and so on. I talk about number 10. It's an obvious in the game. So it's not really a purpose using your older waifu when you get a new character, basically, right? That being said, of course, some of your character will really be able to retain your levels. For example, Yunaka is so OP that she will likely be good the whole game through, because if you use her from the beginning, she's gonna get most of the kills and keep being high level up, right? So I'm not saying that you can't use any of the characters you get in the beginning of the game. I'm just saying that most of the characters, or half or so at least, you get across the game, are basically unplayable. A little bit harder on it, but I mean like Bukuro, you know, Eti, whatever. These characters you get in the beginning, they're gonna be really hard to use, because no matter how you look at it, there's a finite number of XP, right? So no matter who you prefer to play with in the beginning of the game, only half of them or so are gonna get enough XP to be useful in the next chapters, right? So after you play, let's say, 5 chapters, 2-3 characters are gonna be too weak to use. That's just kind of how the game works. You know, again, because you can't grind, you can't lift them up, right? So you have to discard it for new characters. And that's gonna be a recurring thing, right? Of course, as I keep saying, some of your characters will remain levels because they might be useful, right? But eventually you're gonna end up with like half the characters being way too low level, and there's no real way to level them up. It's straight up how it is. But again, I think it actually is the best tip I can give seriously. If you throw away some of your characters as fast as you can when they get too low level, like I immediately threw away like Flamme, Klamme, and those characters. Yeah, then the games get way easier. And I kept doing that. It's basically the newest waifu is the best waifu, but to some extent, yeah. Okay, this woman instead, yeah. This tank, he's out, new tank in, yeah. That makes the game a lot easier, seriously, because every character you get is basically way higher stat than the previous characters, and it's basically impossible in Maddening to make your character be as good as a character coming in, more or less. Except, of course, again, then your few star characters, like for example Yunaka, which is like the best character. She's gonna be like higher level potentially than the character you get, because she's such an incredibly strong character. But kind of the character that aren't super duper overpowered, very unlikely. But anyway, guys, hope you liked the video. Hope you understand the math here and so on, right? Subscribe, slap it, and have a great day.